When she said that, I felt something inside me crack. Like a quiet sound that no one else could hear, but it echoed through my chest anyway. I stared at her from my bed, weak, dizzy, my skin burning with fever, and I honestly couldn't believe those words had just come out of her mouth. I'd spent my entire life taking care of other people. My husband, my son, even her, and now, when I finally needed a little kindness, I was being accused of faking it. Tell me, would you have stayed quiet in that moment, or would you have said something back? Because I'll be honest, that day, I didn't even have the strength to argue. But the silence that followed changed everything. It started about 2 weeks before that moment. I had caught the flu. The real miserable kind that makes your bones ache, your throat burn, and your head feel like it's been stuffed with wet cotton. I live with my son and daughter-in-law. They moved in about a year ago after their apartment lease ended. It was supposed to be temporary, just a few months until they found something new. I didn't mind. I actually thought it would be nice to have company again, after losing my husband 5 years ago. My son Daniel was always my pride and joy. He'd grown into a good man. Kind, hardworking, a little quiet, but dependable. His wife Clara was complicated. At first, she seemed polite, even sweet. But over time, I started to notice little things. The way she would roll her eyes when I offered help. Or the way she'd sigh if I asked her to hand me something. Small, almost invisible cracks that slowly widened until they turned into something else entirely. When I got sick, I thought maybe she'd show a little empathy. I wasn't asking for much, just a cup of tea, maybe help changing the sheets. But instead, from the very first day, she treated my illness like an inconvenience. I remember the second morning. I had barely slept all night, coughing until my chest hurt. I heard her downstairs, laughing on the phone, and I called out weakly for some water. She came to the door, leaned against the frame and said, "You really can't get it yourself." "It's just water," I said. "Honey, I've got a fever of 102. I feel like I might faint." She sighed loudly, stomped down the hall, and came back with the glass like it was the hardest task in the world. She set it down on the nightstand, not even looking at me, and muttered, "You know, my mom never let herself get this bad." She kept moving, even when she was sick. That sentence sat in the air between us like poison. The days went on, and I could tell she resented me more and more for being in bed. I'd hear her banging dishes downstairs, slamming cabinet doors, mumbling things under her breath like, "So dramatic," and "always something." My son, bless him, tried to balance things. He'd come in quietly after work, check my temperature, bring me soup, and sit with me for a few minutes. But I could tell he was tired. He works long hours, and Clara has a way of making him feel guilty for anything he does that doesn't revolve around her. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to cause tension in their marriage. So I tried to take care of myself. I dragged myself out of bed, dizzy, trying to make tea or toast, just to avoid asking for help. Once, I almost fainted in the kitchen, and Clara just stared at me like she couldn't decide whether to help or roll her eyes. She ended up saying, "If you're that weak, maybe you should go to the hospital or something. This is too much." Then came that day. The day she snapped at me. I woke up late, around noon, drenched in sweat. My fever had broken a little, but I still felt drained. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. I could hear Clara downstairs talking to someone. Her friend, I think. She was complaining about how unbelievably helpless I was. I remember hearing her say, "She just lies in bed all day like she's dying. It's the flu, not the plague." My heart dropped. I don't think I'd ever felt that small in my life. When she came upstairs later, I tried to speak up. I said, "Clara, I can hear you when you say those things. I'm really not pretending. I'm just sick." She stopped at the doorway, crossed her arms, and said, "Stop pretending to be sick. You can't keep acting helpless forever." That was it. That was the sentence that broke me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry right away. I just stared at her, and for a moment I could see she realized she'd gone too far. But instead of apologizing, she looked away and left the room. The silence she left behind felt like a heavy fog. Thick, suffocating, and cold. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and thought about every time I had cared for someone in that house. The time Daniel got pneumonia when he was 8, and I stayed up all night sponging his forehead. The time Clara had her surgery last year and I cooked for them, cleaned their laundry, and drove her to appointments because Daniel couldn't get time off work. And now, here I was, being called helpless. It hurt more than any fever or flu ever could. I started to pull away after that. I stopped asking for anything. I'd wait until they left the house to get out of bed and eat something small. I didn't want to give her any more reasons to resent me. Daniel noticed. Of course. He asked why I was so quiet. I didn't tell him the truth at first. I didn't want to create more drama. But one night, he came into my room looking worried. He said, "Mom, did Clara say something to you? She's been tense lately." I hesitated, but then the truth just spilled out. I told him everything. How she'd accused me of pretending, how she'd mocked me behind my back. His face went pale. He didn't say much, just nodded and left the room. I could hear muffled voices later. His and hers, low, sharp, angry tones. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard her say, "She's manipulating you. She always plays the victim." That was when I knew the damage was deep. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause for a moment and think. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you confront her again? Would you tell your son to choose sides? Or would you stay silent and let the tension slowly eat at you? Because what I did next wasn't easy, but it changed the course of our family forever. The next morning, I made myself get up early, shower and dress. My fever was gone, but I still felt weak. I made breakfast for everyone, pancakes, eggs, the works. When they came downstairs, they both looked surprised. Clara sat down cautiously, maybe expecting a confrontation. I kept my voice calm. I said, "I just wanted to thank you both for letting me rest these past few days. I think I'll start looking for a small place to rent nearby. You two deserve your space." Daniel froze. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I smiled and said, "I think it's time. I've been in this house too long. You have your lives, and I have mine." Clara didn't say a word, but I could see something flicker in her eyes. Relief. That told me everything I needed to know. Daniel argued with me for days. He said I didn't need to move, that this was my home. But I insisted. I found a little apartment about 15 minutes away. Cozy, bright, quiet. When I moved out, Clara barely helped. She stood by the door scrolling on her phone while Daniel carried boxes. I could see how uncomfortable he was, torn between guilt and frustration. I hugged him and told him it was okay, that I wasn't angry. But deep down, I was heartbroken. Not just because of what she said, but because I felt like I'd lost my son to someone who didn't understand compassion. A few weeks later, Daniel started visiting more often. Alone. He'd bring groceries or just sit with me, telling me about work or their fights. It turns out, things between them had gotten worse. He told me she was constantly irritable, complaining about finances, about me, about everything. One night, he showed up with a small bag and said, "I can't do it anymore, Mom." My heart dropped. He said he'd tried to talk to her, tried to get her to apologize, but she refused. She told him that if he wanted to run back to his mommy, he should just go. So he did. He slept on my couch for a few weeks while sorting things out. Clara didn't expect him to leave, I think. She called a few times, but Daniel didn't answer. Eventually, she sent me a message. A long one. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, that she was stressed, that she didn't know I was really that sick. But by then, the apology felt hollow. You know when someone only says sorry because they've realized the consequences of their actions? That's what it was. I didn't respond. I didn't want to reopen that wound. Months passed. Daniel and Clara eventually separated. He told me it wasn't just about me. There had been other issues too, things I didn't even know about. Control, resentment, emotional manipulation. He said that moment with me just opened his eyes to who she really was. I felt guilty at first, like I'd somehow caused the breakup. But he told me, "Mom, you just showed me the truth." Hearing that made me cry, not because I was happy she was gone, but because I realized how much pain we'd all been living in. Looking back now, I don't hate Clara. I think she's someone who never learned empathy, maybe because she never received it herself. But that doesn't excuse cruelty. Sometimes, people show you who they are in the smallest, cruelest moments. And you have to believe them. If I had stayed quiet forever, if I had let that kind of behavior continue, I think I would have lost a part of myself. Instead, I chose peace. I chose distance. And it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. So if you're watching this, and you've ever been made to feel small for needing help, please know this: your worth doesn't disappear just because someone else refuses to see it. You deserve kindness, even on your weakest days. Especially on those days. Like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this. And share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Was I wrong to walk away quietly, or should I have confronted her more directly? I'll see you all in the next story.